I'd like to continue our discussion of the State of the Union address, but I want to do so more from the perspective of the economy and share some insights and some of my analysis as to how I view the current state of the U.S. economy and perhaps the global economy as well, if we have some time to dive into that. But I primarily want to focus on the president's speech and the U.S. economy. First, I want to congratulate the president on saying something that he never should have had to have said, and that is that the United States will never be a socialist country. Now, think about that for a minute, 2 minutes, an hour. Put some serious thought into that statement. The fact that the President of the United States had to say that in 2019 tells you the state of our politics and the state of our education system. We fought the Cold War. We fought that quote unquote evil empire, and we beat them because we believe and adhere to the principles of free market capitalism. A lot of people in this country and around the world, unfortunately, want to demonize free market capitalism as some sort of immoral and unethical economic system, when in fact it's quite the contrary. It is the most ethical and moral economic system that exists, that has ever existed, because it doesn't force or compel anyone to do anything. If you want to go shopping for jeans, for tennis shoes, for shirts, for jewelry, for groceries, you can go do so. If you don't need a new watch, nobody forces you to go buy a new watch simply because, well, if you did, that would help GDP. Doesn't work like that. You want to go become a carpenter? You can go become a carpenter. You want to become a software engineer? You can become a software engineer. The state, the government does not dictate where you go to work, how you work, this, that, and the other. You have to have a definitional understanding of what free market capitalism means and is, and what socialism is, what communism is, what fascism is. Those three latter forms of governments slash economic systems do not work, have not worked anywhere because they cannot work. Time and time again, we have people in this country and around the world thinking, well, this time's different because this time I'm in charge. And if only Lenin and Stalin and Mao and Hitler knew what I know today, well, my God, how successful we could be. Yet they always fail to mention the suffering that existed under those regimes, whether it was their own people or others the world over. Whether it was the millions who died and suffered under Stalin and starved to death, or were sent to the gulags, or the tens of millions of Chinese who starved to death and had their rights as human beings completely violated by Chairman Mao. And the list goes on and on. Yet somehow people in the United States of America, and people who are now congressmen and women and senators want to enact laws that are eerily similar to those of such socialistic, communistic, or fascist regimes. But of course, it's President Donald Trump who is this evil dictator that everyone must get around to impeach or vote out of office in 2020. How this argument makes any sense is beyond me, except to reiterate what I have said in the last podcast, was that people must have a few screws loose upstairs. And you can tell if you look into the eyes of some of these people, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, Bernie Sanders, Pocahontas, Senator Warren, Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, Kristen Gillibrand. The list goes on and on. You just look into their eyes, you listen to their speeches and their talking points. They just want to continuously outdo one another in this upcoming presidential election on who can outtax the next person next to them. Who can promise more entitlement programs that are unsustainable? Who can provide Medicare for everybody? It'll be free. It'll be free. Nobody have to pay for anything. When it's free, it's the most expensive it can ever be. So I applaud President Trump for telling this country and this world that the United States of America will never be a socialist nation. And I pray to God that that is a true statement. Because if this country should ever slip and end up in such a state, there will be nowhere else left to go for any hope, for any dreams and aspirations of opportunity and success. Unless, of course, you're joined at the hip to the regime in power, because in such instances, some people are more equal than others. So this was a very important day in American politics that a president had to say such a thing. And he's really, I think, kickstarting the 2020 election with that. I mean, even Chuck and Nancy had to stand up and applaud to say, that's right, Mr. President, this will never be a socialist nation. Now, whether they actually believe that is a completely different story. You can have your opinions. I have mine. I think they teeter back and forth. They're definitely not as extreme as some of the new incumbents to Congress. But we'll see how well Senator Schumer and Speaker Pelosi can do in containing that boisterous crowd of newly elected congressmen and women. I hope they can contain them, because it does a great disservice to the people of this country to have such arguments, period. This debate should be over. All you have to do is read. Everybody is on their phone all day. Take a few minutes. Look up socialism. Look up communism. Look up fascism. Then look up free market capitalism and find out what it really means and what it's really done. Most of the things that we take for granted on a daily basis, is because we have adopted free market capitalism as a system in this country. I look around me right now. The headphones that I'm wearing, the microphone that I'm speaking into, the computer that stores all of this information for me, the software program that allows me to edit this podcast or anything else if I need it, did not come from Chairman Mao, from Lenin or Stalin, or from Hitler, or any other socialistic dictator of the sort. It came from entrepreneurs who said, I can make something better. I can create something out of nothing. I can grab all of these parts. I can organize all of these people, and I can get something done. And they did. And if they are multimillionaires, multi-billionaires, God bless them. God bless them. They've created jobs. They've created opportunities. They've made everybody's life easier. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been successful. People clearly made the decision, I am going to buy this product or I'm going to use this service because it's going to somehow make my life better. If it didn't, you wouldn't buy it. You wouldn't waste your time with the product. You wouldn't waste your time with the service. That is the beauty of free market capitalism. The successful entrepreneur can only be successful if he or she provides the market with what the market wants. If the market only wants four-door sedans, then that's what the entrepreneur is going to give to the market. If they start producing 3 doors on a car and nobody buys it, he's going to go out of business. But if he can convince people, no, look, that's better. 3 doors is better than 4. This is what you want. And if he can convince enough people, then he might be successful. But that's the point. Nobody is forced or compelled to build a 3-door car, nor is anybody compelled to build a 4-door car, or a truck, or a van, or an SUV. If people want to get into that market to produce such vehicles, they can do so. Likewise, on the consumer side, if you don't want to buy a car, you don't have to. To me, this is such a simple concept that perhaps it is the simplicity of it that gets overlooked by those who preach socialism or some form thereof. The fact that people have the right to freely choose what they want to do with their money, to me, is extremely moral and ethical. Being forced to produce something that you don't want to produce, being forced to work somewhere where you don't want to work, being forced to consume something that you don't want to consume, is extremely unethical and immoral, in my opinion. Yet that's what socialism is. That's what it calls for. That's what socialism is. The state controls production. What did Lenin say? The goal of socialism is communism. What does that mean? If socialism is the production, what's communism? It is the production and the consumption being controlled by the state. That means they get to control how much grain gets produced, how many automobiles get produced, and they also get to say to the consumer how many cars you get to buy, how many bales of grain you get to purchase, etc., etc., etc. What is so hard to understand? That's the definition. That's the practice. That was the failure. Why do we continue to think this time is different? No system is perfect because we're all human beings. We're all flawed. So as much as I support free market capitalism, of course there are going to be mistakes because it's managed by people, plain and simple. The question is, what type of problems do you want? Do you want the type of problem that is going to exist because you have too much freedom, or problems because you have too little freedom? That's a no-brainer in my opinion. We will learn from our mistakes. We have a government in place where if somebody is defrauded, they can sue. They can sue that individual, they can sue that corporation. They can be awarded damages. That's a shot across the bow to that industry. Don't do what that company just did because you're going to get caught. You're going to get in a lot of trouble. You're going to lose money. And depending on the situation, you might even end up in prison. This is a battle of ideas. Free market capitalism has already won. Why we talk about taxing the rich to death, beyond me. Why we talk about taxing people after they're dead is beyond me. If taxed them enough their whole life and they want to kick them when they're dead, you have to be insane to believe that that makes sense. Oh, well, they don't need it. Well, of course they don't need it. They're dead. But what about their children? What about their families? Maybe that money will go a long way to helping those people. Money is property. Let me say that again. Money is property. So let's change the words. What happens if we didn't say money? What happens if we use the word our houses? Well, the government's going to tax 70% of our house every year. Or the government is just going to walk in to our house whenever it pleases because it feels that it can, that it has the authority to do so, that somehow housing is a public good for the government to come and take, even though it is your property, you paid for it, matters not. It's exactly how they view your money. Doesn't matter that you get up in the morning and go work your butt off to earn a decent living, put a roof over your family's heads, put food on the table, give your children a better life than you had. It doesn't matter. To these nut jobs, it's their money, and they know better than you how to manage that money. Of course, that's not true. All it takes is a quick look at the United States debt clock, and I strongly urge everybody to do so from time to time. Go to usdebtclock.org. That's usdebtclock.org. And just take a few moments to look at what's going on at screen. Okay? This is not a socialist country, but it's not a pure free market capitalistic system either. I'm the co-author of The Cynic's Guide to Investing. We talk about this very early on in the book to set the stage for our readers to understand the author's philosophy that is going to permeate throughout the entirety of the book. And so we start with the foundation, and we start by having this very conversation of what free market capitalism is, what socialism is, and what fascism is. Now, in this country, we argued in the book, and I still very much strongly believe this, is that this country has a hybrid of these systems. I very much believe that our government is joined very closely, if not at the hip, of many of the world's largest corporations in this country. Take, for example, what we learned about the NSA in the leaks from Edward Snowden with the backdoor channels that existed within the companies of Alphabet or Google, Apple, Facebook, Verizon, AT&T. The list continues. Think about the government contracts that go out to support large companies such as Boeing, such as Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, General Electric. The list continues. These are some of the largest and most powerful corporations in the world, and they are some of the most powerful corporations in the world because they are very closely joined with our government. As Mussolini said, fascism would be better named corporatism because it is the true merger of the state with corporations. Now, if you're looking at the U.S. debt clock, you also see a whole bunch of programs, whether that's Medicare and Medicaid, Social Security, income security, which would consist of welfare. You have food stamps. You have a whole host of things to look at. You can get dizzy looking at it, believe me. Those types of entitlement programs, those types of social programs is very much, in my opinion, a form of socialism. It's not a form of free market capitalism. So, in my opinion, we very much have tenets of both socialism and fascism or corporatism that exists in this country. However, we still do have bits of free market capitalism that exist in this country. Now, the solution to all of the problems that we have is more free market capitalism, not less. We need less socialism. We need less corporatism. And if you look at both sides of the argument, if you look at what was the Tea Party several years ago under the Obama administration, and what you had with the Occupy Wall Street protests following the financial crisis, if these two groups were actually to sit down and come together, they would say, yes, we need to get rid of corporatism. Yes, we need to get rid of socialism. Now, is that going to happen overnight? No. But if you had a serious conversation with these people, especially the level-headed ones, I think that they would come to agreement that they have a lot more in common than what the media would lead everybody to believe. Because they're all blaming the excess of what exists in some parts of corporate America, major banks, and other financial institutions, Occupy Wall Street. And then on the other side, you have the largesse of government spending, the Tea Party. Those problems are joined at the hip. They're married. They're married. How do we unwind them? How do we start to solve them? Free market capitalism. I will get into that in more detail in subsequent podcasts, in many podcasts after this. Just understand the difference. Let's get on the same page as far as definitions. And I think moving forward from there, we can start to have a conversation of not just identifying problems, but also providing solutions. And that's what it's all about at the end of the day. Now, lastly, to sort of wrap up this episode, I want to tie it back with President Trump, his State of the Union, and how he praises himself and the administration on a strong and vibrant economy. Now, folks, there is a difference between the economy and the stock market. And if you recall, when President Trump was candidate Trump, he spoke very eloquently and I think very accurately on the problems of the economy and the role that the Federal Reserve plays in our economy, especially with low interest rates. Now, as a real estate investor, he loves lower interest rates. Yet, as a man running for president, he spoke, in my opinion, very accurately that the policies that the Federal Reserve has been implementing for the past decade are hurting this country, that they're hurting middle Americans and lower income Americans, but benefiting people such as himself. And Trump, as a candidate, said that. I give him great credit for that. And that was one of the reasons I supported the man, because I was like, yes, finally we have somebody who gets it. And to some degree, he said we have a bubble in this economy. We have a bubble in our stock markets, in the major indices, because of the actions undertaken by the Federal Reserve. Now candidate Trump becomes President Trump, and he pretty much does a 180 on that. Now, if I had been advising the president, I would have said, sir, divorce yourself from the stock market. Divorce yourself immediately. Tell the American people what you told them during the campaign. Tell them that the Federal Reserve has propped up this market for a decade with funny money, and that you don't know what the stock market's going to do because the distortionary effects that have taken place as a result of this funny money is anybody's guess. Maybe it goes up a lot, maybe it comes down a lot, maybe it just trends sideways for a long time. I don't know. Let's not worry about it. Divorce yourself, Mr. President, from that issue, from the stock market. Step aside. But keep talking about how the Federal Reserve was on the wrong policy for much too long. Simply tell the American people that what happens in the stock market is going to happen in the stock market because of all of the tinkering that the Federal Reserve has taken upon itself. Tell the American people, Mr. President, that you are here to cut taxes, to slash regulations, to renegotiate trade deals, to negotiate new trade deals, and to create an environment that creates a solid foundation for future growth throughout this economy, for real growth to happen, for true savings to occur, for real investment to take root and to expand this economy the right way. Not through debt and the printing of funny money, but through the savings and investment of consumers and corporations alike. Unleash the animal spirits of the American people, the American entrepreneur, and this economy will do well. What happens with the stock market is another story. The wizard behind the curtains pulling the levers, pull the curtain over, tell the American people there's a guy pulling the lever. What happens, happens. But now he's sort of tied himself to the stock market because he pats himself on the back that it made all-time highs under his administration. And he very much wants it to make, again, all-time highs after the bear market that we have entered very recently. Now, the president in late December sent out a tweet that said, buy the dips. This upsets me. It upsets me because it, again, concentrates too much power in the hands of the few. Did the president tell everybody to sell the top and save yourselves from losing 15 to 25%? No, he did not. But he told you to buy the dips. If you're not going to tell us sell the top, Mr. President, don't tell us to buy the dips. In fact, you shouldn't be doing either, because now when you do that, you become another wizard behind the curtain. This economy, this stock market is not supposed to function by people pulling on levers behind the scenes, tweeting out headlines, giving news conferences such as the Federal Reserve Chairman. And markets move 1,000 points, 800 points. And I'm not exaggerating. That's exactly what happened. So while I believe that the president is doing a lot of good things for building a solid foundation to take root in this country, I believe he should have divorced himself from the stock market. Because if the stock market takes another turn to the downside and retests those levels or breaks through those recent lows, he's going to have a lot of explaining to do. Now, the president may be able to sidestep it. He may be able to bring up past administrations. He may be able to bring up the Federal Reserve. And he may have enough people supporting that. But is it going to be enough to propel him to a second term? Time will tell. We are far from over from having this conversation reach its end. So with that, I again advise you to check out usdebtclock.org. Take a look at that. I also invite you to our website, thecapitalnews.com. That's thecapitalnews.com, and that's capital with a K. I just posted a recent story there, commentary on the Federal Reserve and Chairman Powell's most recent press conference, where I simply asked, what Americans are you talking about? Check it out. I think you'll like it. Leave a comment. I appreciate it very much. Hope to have you guys back next time. This is the Capital News. I am Alex Karitis. Godspeed.